Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here at our inaugural event on Union Time on Taxpayer Dime. And with my friend, Senator Joni Ernst here, who is always good at digging up the news on what exactly these guys are up to. And she's absolutely plaguing union bosses with this work right now. This is the Public Labor Union Accountability Committee. There you go. See, I got it out in one breath. It's a tough one. What PLUAC is doing, you can use the nickname, I'm letting you, is creating a way to bring light to the far left's agenda on using government unions, teachers unions, and media unions, and all the stuff that they get into. That's the accountability part in the name. And let me tell you, you know this, Senator, the only thing that government does innovatively is find new and creative ways to take and spend your money on nonsense. And you have to get really creative when you're trying to figure out. And that's where Senator Ernst comes in. Exposing public sector unions is like shooting fish in a barrel for her. She's got this under control. But the American taxpayer is being hosed by public sector unions. They spend their time and hundreds of millions of dollars funding elections, propping up Democrats, fighting for radical policies that a majority of taxpayers don't want and have no idea that they are paying for advocating. That's one of the things I love about this group, is that I just want people to know more about what these unions are doing. By the way, holding them accountable is popular. A PLUAC poll from April showed 88% of those surveyed believe there should be more transparency around these unions and the burden they place on taxpayers. Big labor is a power center for Democrats. They organize muscle and money. They stand in the way of common sense for state and federal governments, and they keep us from keeping them accountable. For instance, there are tons of important programs like the unemployment insurance, SNAP, Social Security Disability, that are fully reimbursed by the feds, but have little transparency and have this combination of public sector unions working in them, which can really be a problem for taxpayers. Pardon me while I turn this page. I got it. So if there isn't transparency, we know that these guys are bilking taxpayers. Senator Ernst, let me just say, as a taxpayer and somebody who cares deeply about this issue, thank you so much for looking into this. I know it can be thankless at times, but it's really important to find this stuff out. The Public Labor Union Accountability Committee is thrilled to be with you today to talk about your work bringing transparency and accountability to the practice of taxpayer-funded union time, where government employees, I want to make this very clear, engage in their union activities during work hours with the money we pay them. To deal with that problem would be a savings of at least $160 million a year, and I bet you can find more. All right, enough out of me. Let's get to the main event. The senator from the great state of Iowa, always making them squeal, Senator Joni Ernst.
Thank you, and it's great to be here, and I appreciate the attention to this issue because we have worked so long and hard on raising awareness to the issues in the federal government, and of course with DOGE, so much of this we've been able to bring to light. But do want to thank PLUAC very much for allowing us to be here today and talk about this issue. Mary Catherine, thank you. I think we're going to dive in. And folks, if you pay attention to Iowa at all, we've got 99 counties. My senior senator and I travel all 99 of those counties. I call it my river to river tour every year. And what I'm doing, I meet with employees. I meet with all kinds of hardworking folks all across the state. And they really are out there giving it all they've got. They work hard for their employers. And then they look at Washington, D.C., and they see that the federal employees aren't exactly working for them. Iowans are working hard, but they see that federal employees is just simply not the case where they're working hard. So we have a lot of discussion. We'll focus on the taxpayer-funded union time, but we've explained it already this morning, but that's where the federal government is actually footing the bill for these unions, which means that the taxpayers are footing the bill for the federal government to foot the bill for these unions that are working against the federal government and the taxpayers. So it just doesn't really make sense. So we have been spending hundreds of millions of dollars every single year on these union bosses that are arguing with our agencies on very trivial things that we will talk about here in a moment, I'm sure. The negotiations include bargaining over employees' ability to work from their couches. Yes, we saw that during COVID, but wow, for years after COVID ended, we continued to pay employees to work from their couches, or as I've also uncovered, from their bubble baths, and not joking about that, folks. So rooting out this kind of waste is exactly why DOGE exists. We cannot forget that the E in DOGE stands for efficiency, but our taxpayer-funded union time is very inefficient. And so you mentioned the most recent data that we have, which is from 2019. We found in 2019, so this is 6 years ago, this data, $160 million is what the federal government spent on taxpayer-funded union time. That was 1 year, $160 million. So I sent a request to OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, and we demanded transparency from every agency so we know how much we're actually investing in this union time and what taxpayers have paid for. So you all know, and you heard it just this last weekend, we can't wait because we have now a debt that's over $37 trillion. You know, what a horrible milestone for the United States to hit. And that's why my Taxpayers' Wallets Act would require agencies to go back and charge the unions of the cost of that time. And I exposed employees claiming union time while they were on basically vacation. They were sunning themselves in Puerto Rico. They have been caught running a real estate business down in Florida, supposedly working on this time. And even one that we had a whistleblower raise attention to, she was actually sitting in jail for a DUI, and she claimed that she was on taxpayer-funded union time while in jail. So we really don't know how much time in recent years has been charged to the taxpayers because, as I said, the most recent data we have is from 2019. President Biden buried all of this data during his time in office, and they would not share it with my office. So we just don't know what the total cost is to taxpayers today. So because of that, we also have my Taxpayer-Funded Union Time Transparency Act. So if the union won't pay it, we'll put an end to it. So there's just a couple bills there that we'll talk about, but let's just go ahead and dive into some of the questions. And I've got a lot of data that we've prepared for today to share with you, but some of the stuff will just blow your minds. Yeah. So thank you very much for having this discussion.
Well, I love that we're getting more data. I do feel like it's sort of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity when you have people who can gather that information, who care about it, and can do it competently, and I think a partnership with DOGE is a great way to do that. I also want to compliment the modesty of a Midwest politician from Iowa who says, I don't know if you guys pay attention to Iowa, to a group of people in Washington. It's like, oh, we all know you have 99 counties. Like, we've all been to them too. But thank you so much for your work on this. Federal workers are definitely taking advantage of Americans, and they don't even know it, right? And one of the things that I always point out to folks is FDR himself thought that public sector unions shouldn't be bargaining against taxpayers. He's like, it's the same entity. It's not as if you have a private company that makes more profit and then the workers can say, great, I'd like some of that profit. The government isn't creating things. It's just taking taxpayer money. So every step of the way, the bargaining is paid for by taxpayers. But it gets even more egregious than that. You noted some of the crazier things they've done. One, why are they allowed to use this time on our dime? And two, what is your favorite crazy example?
Yeah, exactly. So in 1979, there was an act that allowed then unions to come back and pay for time on the taxpayer's dime. And we don't like that. So again, we are trying to change that. As I noted before, 2019 is the latest data that we have. And if you think about across the spectrum of our federal government, all of the federal agencies, 6 years ago, 2019, $160 million. Because President Biden buried this data, I went out, I've requested the data from the 24 largest agencies, departments across the federal government. I have gotten a few responses back, very few, but I have gotten some responses from those agencies that do want to disclose this information, which I think is helpful. So the union time data for 2023 and 2024, and again, we're still waiting on the full data, but I'll share some of the numbers that I've gotten. So NASA, okay, so in 1 year's time, NASA spent $1.5 million on taxpayer-funded union time. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission spent $800,000. The workers, and this one kills me because I'm a veteran, workers at the Defense Health Agency, which oversees the health benefits for our servicemen and women, spent 87,000 hours attributable to their union time at a cost of $3.3 million, including $190,000 spent negotiating on one labor contract. $3.3 million spent on time that they should be working for our men and women in uniform on their health benefits. But instead, they took that money, that $3.3 million, away from those servicemen and women. They should have been, instead of working on their own health benefits and interests, they should have been working for our men and women in uniform. So that one to me is probably one of the most egregious. And again, that's just a few of the agencies that have actually responded to our request for information. The others have not been forthcoming on this. It is like pulling teeth to get data out of some of these agencies because they know it is going to look so badly to our taxpayers.
Well, in the case of the Defense Health Agency that you note, in just that short period of time, those 87,000 hours, leave it to a union to figure out how to get basically paid 3 times over. Like, I'm working on something, but I'm not working on it. And also, I'm using that time to get paid to work on more benefits, which will take more money from the people I'm supposed to be helping. It's really an amazing scam. You mentioned you've introduced the Protecting Taxpayers' Wallets Act, and fellow Republican Representative Scott Perry has championed the measure in the House to compel government unions to reimburse taxpayers for all their taxpayer-backed union activities. I love this idea, and I'm sure Democrats who get paid through all that money are going to be like, wait, no, reimbursements, we don't do that. Why aren't Democrat colleagues on board with this little idea?
Yes. Well,
Can you get a few
I
of
think
them?
it's pretty obvious. Certainly, the public unions they large in part support Democrats. So, each of them have their hands in the other's pockets. So they work hand in hand against our taxpayers, and I think it's very bad. If you are working for the government, folks, you should be working for the American people. Okay, that's who is funding you. That is who is paying for you. You should be working for all of our citizens. So we've done a number of investigations through my squeal work. We were all Doge before it was actually Doge. We were Squeal back in the day. But we've turned up these instances of employees that, again, claim to be on union time. I've mentioned them already. There was an employee that got caught, working for the federal government while they were in Puerto Rico hanging out on the beach. I mean, they were literally caught. But the way they get around it is they say, well, I'm doing my taxpayer-funded union time. Okay, so they're taking a vacation on the taxpayer's dime, but claiming they're working for the unions. There was another one that actually started their own real estate business, was working full time doing real estate, claiming, no, it's not my regular job. I'm being paid by the union. This is my union time. And then we have the one that had got drunk and got pulled over and put into jail for a DUI. And I'll even note, they claimed again that they weren't working their regular telework job. They were working for the union when this happened. And mind you, when we dug into this specific case of the woman that was jailed, she actually was pulled over somewhere around noon. She already was over the legal limit for her alcohol consumption. Her blood alcohol content got thrown in the slammer. So again, claiming, wow, I'm actually on taxpayer-funded union time. So they're using this basically as a way to get out of trouble because we've caught them in their telework positions, not actually working, but doing other activities. Well, then they can just say, well, I'm on my union time.
Well, and if they're using that excuse for the most egregious offenses, that there are
Every day.
a million more less bad things happening every day that take advantage of taxpayers. Now, we know the language for this Protecting Taxpayers' Wallets Act was not in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And the Senate's deadline for reconciliation is looming. We're working a lot of angles here. There's many things changing. What are your plans and timeline for maybe getting this legislation passed?
Right.
How do we emphasize the importance of this?
Yes, and believe me, so Congressman Scott Perry and I have worked really hard to try and get this into the One Big Beautiful Bill, and it has not made it through the bird bath in the Senate. So that's the problem that we have there. So what my team and I are doing, we're going back and we're scrutinizing the language again with this particular act to see if we can make it bird compliant. If we cannot, then we will offer it up as an amendment. I'll offer that up on the floor of the Senate. Hopefully it will be taken up and we can vote on it. I'd love to see the Democrats vote against a common sense piece of legislation. If we cannot get it amended into the One Big Beautiful Bill, then we will try and live you see it. I will tell you, however, that it likely will be blocked by a Democrat. They will come down, they will block it, so we won't be able to get unanimous consent. So there's a number of ways that we can try and move this forward, but we have to be very, very creative about how we do this. So do I see it actually getting amended into the One Big Beautiful Bill? Probably not. But we will have other avenues and ways of approaching this then in the future. But I'd love to get it done this year. If at all possible, let's get it done this year. We really need to wipe out this cost to our taxpayers.
Now, when we talk about public sector unions, they're not just at the federal level. They are at the state level working on programs that are funded by federal money. So when you're working on a transparency effort, in whether it's legislation or just finding data, are we able to potentially improve efficiency, not just at the federal level, but at some of those programs on the state level?
Absolutely. So the federal government can set that standard, and then we hope then that state and local governments will also follow. And this has been an issue, and just for transparency's sake, and to talk about some of the things that not just the federal government is lobbying on or negotiating on. Things like they spend hours and hours negotiating like the height of the cubicle walls. There was one, they spent hours negotiating to have cubicle walls 14 inches higher.
Okay.
They've negotiated on things like can employees wear spandex to work? Can they wear leggings? Can they wear shorts? I mean, this is what we are paying for.
Yeah.
I cannot.
If you're telling me about federal employees wearing spandex at work, maybe walls do matter.
Yeah, maybe we should slap some doors on those cubicles because, it's just really things that, in a normal workplace, we just have like a dress code.
Right.
You adhere to that dress code. but it is the federal government.
Well, and that's one thing that I communicate to people who are new to this issue is federal employees, because of these rules, have benefits that you have never heard of, that you will never see as a private sector employee. At one point, when federal employees were offered by DOJ and the president this 8 months severance, I was like, oh, to be terrorized like a federal government employee and get 8 months severance, which I've never seen in my entire life. It's a whole different way of looking at work. But the money to make that different way of working in spandex or with your cubicles or from your bubble bath or Puerto Rico or jail comes at the expense of taxpayers. What are your conversations like with regular taxpayers when you bring this to their attention?
Oh my gosh, they are appalled. I mean, they truly are appalled because Iowa's pretty common sense. I imagine most of you are from other states. And regular families, regular workers, back home, wherever we all come from, they look at Washington, D.C., and their minds are blown. I mean, they just can't comprehend the lunacy that goes on in some of these agencies. I mean, honestly, we were paying a gentleman to work for Veterans Affairs, and he thought it was appropriate to do a Zoom call while he was in a bubble bath. A Zoom call where he actually took picture of himself in the bubble bath and put it on Instagram. Okay, not appropriate. So, but because he is part of a union, we can't fire him. We can't, hold him to account
That's
because
his emotional
he's working
support.
on union time.
That's his emotional support bubble bath.
Yeah, well, it's pretty gross. Big old hairy leg hanging out of a bubble bath, over the edge of the tub. And he's taking pictures of it and sharing it with his fellow employees. And it's like, probably not appropriate if you do that in the workplace on a Zoom call. So probably not appropriate that you're doing that and sharing it with others.
Some of it is truly so wild that it is hard to believe. So I'm glad you're actually gathering the evidence on it, because I tell people these stories sometimes and they're like, that can't be what's happening. But in fact, it is.
Yep, sure is.
As chair of the Senate DOJ caucus, you released a report showing that 90% of federal employees were teleworking, while the government spent over $8 billion to maintain and lease vacant federal office buildings. I've seen this in person, just living in the area. They're all sitting there empty while everyone's sitting at home. Step one was getting these workers back to the office, which I can tell by the metro and the traffic is happening to some extent. But step two, getting these deep-pocketed unions to foot their own bills. What can we do to make permanent change maybe on this front?
Well, we do have to make permanent change, and I just actually was out at the South Building of the USDA. So if you're familiar with the USDA work area here in Washington, D.C., they've got a building on the north side of the street, and then they've got the South Building. And only about 22% of the South Building is utilized. And that building, no joke, folks, if you've driven by there, that building is literally a city block, a DC city block. And so large in part, it sits there unused. And so what we are trying to do with this, we are trying to push back and actually get employees back to work, which that is happening. The telework still exists, but less than it did during COVID. So for the unused buildings, we are trying to find a way to sell off or consolidate operations into buildings. It just makes sense. These agencies get very territorial, but for heaven's sakes, if you're not going to use a building,
not even there.
Yeah, if you're not going to use the building, why should we pay billions of dollars every single year for the upkeep and maintenance, the modernization that happens at the cost to the taxpayers when nobody's actually going to use those buildings? So we do have a bill that is called the For Sale Act, where we have packaged together, and I'm offering this as a pay-for the One Big Beautiful Bill. We've packaged together 6 underutilized federal buildings here in the Washington, D.C. area that could be auctioned off to the tune of probably about $400 million is what we're estimating. But in that case, bringing that revenue in, but then saving billions and billions of dollars in the maintenance every year ongoing at the cost to the taxpayers. We have across the United States 77,000 unoccupied
Unbelievable.
buildings that the federal government owns, unoccupied all across the United States. Why do we continue to pay for the upkeep of these buildings when we're not even using them?
Yeah. I feel like anytime you say the word building, you can catch Trump's ear, so that might help with that one. And just as an example, like I have 4 kids, and I'm a taxpayer, and I'm in Northern Virginia stacking those kids like an aircraft carrier in the very small square footage we have because it is expensive to live here. So you've got these huge open buildings that are expensive to maintain, could make a bunch of money back for the taxpayer, while the taxpayers are footing the bill sitting in their small square footage. Like that is the dichotomy. That is the perfect example of what this looks like and how they take advantage of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just through years and years and years of work on this, my team and I have been able to put together the data, the statistics, but again, trying to get that information from the federal government, whether it's taxpayer-funded union time, whether it's the occupancy rate of their buildings, all of that, they will avoid members of Congress like the plague. They will not get back to us. So much so that doing my squeal work, we often have to turn to third parties, taxpayer watchdogs out there to do FOIA requests. And they get the information faster than when I send a request to the agencies. So pretty telling.
Yeah. Well, Senator, I am so glad that you were with us today at PLUAC. I'm so glad that you are working on these issues. Taxpayers will be thanking you. We will be working to make sure that they know as much about this as possible. And I wish you the best of luck in trying to get this into the one big beautiful bill or passed later in the year. Thank you so much for your work.
Thanks, Mary Catherine. And thank you to PLUAC as well. This has been a wonderful conversation today. And I hope that all of you will take up that mantle as well of really being a federal government watchdog, because we need more people out there that are pushing these issues so that we can get them corrected. Your members of Congress need to have support in getting this information and actually finding solutions. So thank you all so much for what you do. Thank you.
If you need me, I'll be in my bubble bath.